everybody, and welcome back to youtube.com/Grumble. I'm Grumble, and today we're doing something just a little bit different, because here's a video that I've been wanting to make for a little while now, because I review a lot of stuff. I review books and audiobooks that I like, I review games that I like, and I tend to keep those reviews as spoiler-free as possible. Here today is a little spoiler chat about a bunch of games and stories that I've enjoyed recently. I've sort of paired them up just because I am a big fan of intertextuality. I've paired them mostly in doubles, one trio of works that, where I find the intertextual connection very pleasing to my brain. The pairs that we have today are Foxhunt, which is a novel by Wigmore, and two games, Neocab and Cloudpunk. I'll talk more about this later, but Foxhunt comes from the solarpunk genre, while Cloudpunk and Neocab live in the cyberpunk genre, but there are intertextual themes and motifs that gel really well together, so I've paired those up. Then something like a duo that I've actually been meaning to write a longish essay about for a while. Courtney Summers' novel The Project, about a young woman who tries to save her sister from a cult. And Sagebrush, which is a game that I played a while ago on PS4 that basically takes you into the investigation of a cult after one of the typical catastrophes that may befall a cult have already happened. Then we have Concerning My Daughter, which is a novel by Kim Hye-Jin and translated by Jamie Chung from Korean into English. It's about it's about the mother of a queer woman and overcoming prejudice, overcoming the sort of cultural socialization that says, don't get involved in stuff that's none of your business. So that's Concerning My Daughter by Kim Hye-Jin. And then I do actually both have them here. Here you go. And the other is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, a fantastic novel about two young women, one of whom is a serial killer. And then the fourth pairing is two video games, namely Stray, which I've just very, very recently finished, the game about the little kitty cat in a cyberpunk dystopia, and the game Eternal Threads, which I just recently made a video about. In both stories, humanity have effectively effed themselves in the face, but whereas in Stray, the catastrophe's already happened and humanity is gone, and you see humanity mainly defined by its absence. In Eternal Threads, humanity's literally fighting for its existence, literally fighting for its survival, and you, the player character, are an active part in that. Except, of course, the fight could at all times backfire and actually spell humanity's extinction. But also in Eternal Threads, humanity is also defined by its absence, because you are investigating the lives of people who, at that point when you enter the timeline, have died, and you can only look at their memories. So yeah, that's the works that we're looking at today. Hello. The cat will be joining us at random intervals. I have no control. I just work here. I know. So I'll be talking for a couple minutes about each of them, about the themes that interest me, about narrative structure, about effective use of tropes, about world building, about characterization. So do please join me for that. I'll enter chapters into the description so that you can jump to a specific section should you wish to, and I'll hope you enjoy. Let's start with Foxhunt, Neocab, and Cloudpunk. Neocab and Cloudpunk, as I said, both sit on the cyberpunk end of the spectrum, and Foxhunt falls into the solarpunk genre. In Foxhunt, the climate catastrophe has happened. Humanity has had to grapple with how to restore the planet. A huge part of the world building in Foxhunt is, the idea of CO2 debt, so that anything you do that produces CO2 essentially puts you in debt, and basically going over the limit of CO2 debt that each person is allowed is literally a crime. And of course, as in each world, that has rules like this. There's people who believe themselves above the rules, and they'll bribe and corrupt their way so that they can live large. Another big part of Foxhunt is body modification, which will tie into Neocab and Cloudpunk respectively, but it's also present in the character's queerness, because Foxhunt is a world where queerness is entirely normalized. Introducing yourself with your pronouns is normalized. The main character is a bisexual, bigender, trans woman, and it is detailed how she receives her treatment. It's based on nanite technology, literally work in her blood, but the blood, capital B, is also a big part of her, because the blood is what gives her magical abilities. She's a quite powerful practitioner, but her treatments, as they happen in a friend of hers underground clinic, are very much not legally sanctioned, provide a constant field of tension between her and the world, as it both sometimes accepts her and not. Even as her hormone treatments not entirely legally sanctioned, she still feels mostly safe in the world that she inhabits. But then it turns out that someone she assumes to be sent by the council actually takes blood from her in the middle of the night while she's sleeping in the capital, and she already doesn't feel entirely safe being there, seeing as she was summoned basically, and someone just takes her blood, which is in the middle of the night while she's sleeping, and she has no idea, which is a grievous violation of her privacy and of her bodily autonomy. And seeing as there's a great emphasis within the world building on the social contract, but also on autonomy, there's that that twist that comes in where feel sort of the mask starting to slip, and certainly the hold that the council has over magic users. So she sees it as a violation of her privacy and as an act of surveillance, because she thinks that the council wants to find out where literally her blood comes from. And this ties into like stuff that you'll find in both in Neocab and in Cloudpunk, because in both of those, body modification is a huge thing. In Neocab, you'll find people altering their appearance with glamours most of the time, sometimes with implants, people with artificial limbs. So it ranges from the purely cosmetic to the really deep-seated body modification that's a staple of the cyberpunk genre. And in Neocab, you'll have this feel grid, which is literally a bracelet, or it may be a necklace or any kind of other jewelry that picks up on your heartbeat and your pulse. According to how you feel, changes color. So it's literally a grid of color, and that tells you or tells other people how you feel. And throughout the game, you grapple with with what it means to be wearing this. Essentially, you're broadcasting your emotions to whoever is in her cab, because she's a Neocab, she's literally a cab driver, and she's broadcasting her emotions to whoever's in the cab with her. However you feel changes based on the answers that you give in the dialogue system. The way you feel may actually preclude you from choosing a reaction, because either you're in a good mood and you don't want to start a fight, or you're in a really bad mood, and Lena can't see her way clear to perhaps de-escalating. So depending on how you feel, the game may say, whoops, no, that's a dialogue choice you can't make right now. And it's it's part detective story, because you're trying to find out what happened to your friend, but it's also a deeply personal story about someone who's been stuck basically in an unhealthy and partially toxic relationship with someone who knew perfectly well about Lena's feelings and proper took advantage of them without ever really giving anything in return, except maybe trouble. Her friend definitely uses what she sees on the feel grid against her. She's actually the person who gave it to her. It becomes an aspect of surveillance, because it's not only visible to other people, but it's visible to any CCTV. The data may be collected by corporations, and it becomes a very personal surveillance device, because Lena's friend does in fact fit it with a bug so that she can literally listen to all of her conversations. So it becomes not just a world building sense of you never have your privacy, your feelings are constantly being recorded. you're broadcasting them to the world, so literally barely even the thoughts in your head are only your own business, but it becomes this device of betrayal and invasion of privacy within that relationship. So the personal really mirrors the social, something that also connects Foxhunt to Neocab in that sense, because you have, in a dystopia, the lack of privacy of this kind is sort of taken as read, and in the more I don't want to call like Foxhunt utopian solarpunk, but it has the underpinnings of we're doing things right this time. And so to have the twist in there, that like first betrayal when Orpheus is in the capital and discovers that the blood's been taken without her consent or knowledge over the night, it's that first crack in both in that social contract and in the private space between her and the person that did it, especially because at first she doesn't know who did it, so she doesn't trust anyone around her. So if you're into found family, if you want to read queer solarpunk, then look no further than Foxhunt. It's incredible. I really enjoyed it. For Cloudpunk, I've not finished it. I've not finished playing it. It's similar to Neocab in that you're a driver. Only in Neocab you transport passengers, and in Cloudpunk you're a delivery driver. The delivery sims are good. They're just good. Delivery sims in a cyberpunk dystopia are just good. Play them. They're lovely. I really enjoy the way that Cloudpunk uses like environmental storytelling and really just flavor text sometimes to tell you how the world works. Like there's a lot of stuff that you pick up just by driving around or walking around and hearing announcements or hearing advertisements for stuff. And stuff like that is really just like it's not written down anywhere. You just hear it as you move through the world. So it takes place in the city of Novalis. Rania, the protagonist, is from the Eastern Peninsula, and there are so many instances where she meets people who just end up behaving in the worst xenophobic and racist ways. There's huge issues of classism in Cloudpunk, because you have like spaces like the vents and the hollows and the marrow, like really just incredibly telling names, especially for the places where slum regions, essentially, sometimes where people live in the ruins, sometimes where the ruins are so torn down that there's no life possible, and it's just people live in the marrow of the city. They live in the vents, and they were driven out of the hollows because it was completely uninhabitable. It's effective use of tropes without feeling tired, and it's really effective world building in each part. In Neocab as well, like there's a lot of stuff that just happens by the by in conversations that you have with passengers. It happens in the few confrontations that Lena has with the police. You won't meet one police officer without them offering, hey, if you just give me enough money, I'll look past this. And the constant surveillance, having to register at each point all of your infractions being in your file, no matter what those infractions may be. If you're looking for cyberpunk or solarpunk, if you're up for that field of tension in bodily autonomy, in privacy, then Foxhunt, Neocab, and Cloudpunk are definitely novels and games that I would recommend. I very much enjoyed them, or in the case of Cloudpunk, I'm very much still enjoying it. And yeah, those were my loving impressions of those three. Next up, Sagebrush and the Project. Well, the project is presented through the eyes of Lo, who was in a horrible accident when she was a child, and Bea, her sister, met someone at the hospital who claimed that he was able to perform a miracle and save Lo, where she was in the ICU. It turns out that Lev Warren, the guy who came to save Lo, is a cult leader, and that's as a price for saving her sister, Bea has to believe, and then enters the cult. And it's years after all of this. The cult is called the Unity Project, and it's years after all this that it's come to the point where the cult is completely isolating Bea, because every time that Lo has to make contact, they tell her, well, she doesn't want to talk to you, so, go away, basically. Where Sagebrush is an investigation of a catastrophe that has already happened. the project to an extent is too, because as things go on, you get, you know, increasingly the sense that Bea may already also be dead, but, you know, it's very much Lo trying to get a way in, trying to free her sister. You know, she becomes involved with the cult itself. She meets Lev Warren. She meets him. He agrees to interviews with her, and you know, it's really gripping, because as she's interviewing him, of course, you know, he's gaslighting her. He's you know, basically he's using the cult spiel on her, but under the guise of, you know, trying to show her that all of her you know, like that her concerns about the cult are just paranoia, and that it's all false propaganda fed to her by the outside world, as she's initially completely resistant to it because he's such a charismatic personality. It, you know, you find as a reader that you find it working on her, and that's the terrifying thing, because even as she knows that, you know, he hurt the people that are living with the cult, he hurt her sister. Like, there's the common tropes of confession tapes. All of that is present in the project. And even though Bea knows all of this, intellectually knows all of this, no one is immune to propaganda. No one is immune to the workings of a really charismatic cult leader. Even if you know that it's a cult, there's a sense of an active threat in that novel always hanging over you, because Lev is trying to get her on his side, but he's also assessing the threat. If it's really true that the young man who died was pushed in front of the subway train, then, you know, what else might Lev be capable of to keep the cult's secrets? As the novel goes on, you very much get the feeling of, you know, we're driving straight towards a terrible conclusion. And the ending really is, it's very bittersweet, because Lo can't save her sister. She barely saves herself and her niece. It's a very affecting novel, very affecting story. Courtney Summers has talked in depth about, you know, the research that she did about cults, about people who left cults, about how hard it is, and the courage that it takes. And this is one of the big aspects of Sagebrush, the game, is that they prey on people who are in a vulnerable position. And Sagebrush takes place on pretty huge, on a farm, basically, on a ranch out in the middle of nowhere. They grew their own crops and everything, so, you know, they were completely cut off from the outside world. Encouraged that kind of us versus them thinking. The cult leader also physically and emotionally abused the cult's members, sexually exploited female members. Like, there's a porno making basement with a huge bed and cameras in the cult leader's house. Barn, and there's old mine shafts where you find corpses of members that dissented, the evidence of the ritualistic torture. If someone had bad thoughts, then they were punished by the cult leader, or they had to, you know, harm themselves. Basically, it's a barn, and there's a lot of knives and a lot of blood. So, you know, just so you know, if you do want to play that game, approach the barn with caution. And you find all of this out as you wander around the parts of the grounds that are accessible. And the big catastrophe that I mentioned at the beginning is that they did have like a church building, essentially, and in that church building the cult leader eventually set fire to himself and everybody. So there was a mass suicide event. So, you know, he built them up to basically their ascension / cleansing event, where they would, you know, purge all their sins and, yeah, lock the doors and set everything on fire. And yeah, just intertextually, like the different stages at which you are, like whether you're, because Lo is seeing, you know, the workings of the cult, you know, as it's happening. And in Sagebrush, the narrative structure of, piecing the pieces of it together. So same way that in Sagebrush, you watch those memories hurtling towards its inevitable and catastrophic conclusion. In the project, you can really just hope that some of them make it out unscathed, because, you know, those tracks are getting narrower and narrower. And certainly, as I already mentioned, you know, the story, the tropes, the world building of, you know, complete isolation, a cult leader's complete emotional and psychological control over the cult's members, the abuse that goes into it, having to bare your soul to the cult. But, you know, if it is something that you're interested in, the project and Sagebrush, I think, as sort of looking at connected media and looking at intertextuality sort of as like a shot chaser kind of thing, definitely a combination of media that I would recommend looking at together to explore those themes. Yeah, so if that's something that tickles your brain, there you go. I'm going to start with Concerning My Daughter. I do have a spoiler-free review up on my queer literature blog, Rainbow Bookshelf, so if you wanna give that a read, I'll put the link in the description. Concerning My Daughter is about the mother of a queer young woman who has sort of rejected her parent given name and goes by Green, and she works as an early career lecturer at a university, and her mother works as a nurse at a hospital. It's basically it's a home for the elderly, and she's taking care of Jen, who traveled a lot. Like she never married, she never had kids. Sort of the people managing her estate have arranged for her to be in that home. Green's mother, who's not named, by the way, it's entirely written from her perspective, so we don't have a name for her, is the nurse assigned to Jen. Jen suffers from Alzheimer's. It's progressing, but she still has, you know, completely lucid moments and completely lucid days where, you know, they talk a lot. They talk about Jen's travels, about the people that she met. There's a common thread in how the mother views Jen's life and her daughter's life, which is mainly, why would you get involved in the lives of people who you don't know and who you're not connected to, like both in the sense of it's not your business, but also in the sense of why are you making it your business? Why are you expending energy or money on stuff that, you know, has nothing to do with you? Why are you rocking the boat? Because Green, her daughter, is gay. She's been living with her girlfriend Lane for a number of years, and they're both because they're sort of freelance, you know, their contracts aren't as strict as for tenured professors, and they don't have the benefits and they don't have the protections that tenured professors have. And there's a group specifically of queer lecturers at that university who, you know, have been teaching queer history, queer media, just the fact that, you know, queer people exist to these college students. One of them, or several of them, I believe, got terminated, got fired without a cause given, because the university didn't want to make a fuss and didn't want to be, you know, pulled up on, oh, we fired you because you're gay. At most, it was cited that they were teaching inappropriate material. That is why they were let go. And Lane and Green are part of a group protesting this and literally picketing the university every day. At the very least, get the university to admit why they fired these lecturers. You know, they've basically, Lane and Green have run out of money, and because they can't get a loan, because, you know, they're neither of them married to necessarily a man. Green has asked her mother either if she can take out a loan or another mortgage on the house and support them this way. When her mom says no, she says, well, then we have no choice but to move in with you for a while, at least until we can find something else. And, you know, since the novel is written from her mother's point of view, you really just get, it's basically stream of consciousness writing. You get a mother's impression of Green and Lane's relationship, of their protest work. You know, if you've read, for instance, If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha, or if you've read Kim Ji-young, born 1982, which is an incredible novel, by the way, then you know women in Korean society are still expected to behave certain ways. And basically the thinking is, you know, as a woman in Korea, you're rewarded for being married, and if you're married you get a better job, as detailed in the novel, where, you know, you only really have a chance if you're married. But since there's no marriage equality, and Green doesn't want to enter into a sham marriage with anybody. She doesn't have those chances. So for her mother, the homophobia stems from, she is destroying her own chance at social advancement. There's a little bit of an element of shame to it, like bringing shame to the family, in the sense that if the daughter isn't behaving correctly, then obviously the parents did something wrong. She does say in conversation with Green and with Lane, you could still do the right thing. You could still be a good daughter, and thus make me a good mother. So there's just this element of, I don't want my daughter to be gay because it's ruining her social prospects, basically. Coupled with, why are you getting involved in the unjust firing of those other lecturers? Why are you calling attention to yourself? Why do you care? Like, it's legit that thinking of, these people have nothing to do with you, why do you care? And it's, because Jen, the woman that she cares for, used to do a lot of charity work, and it's this, this rejection of social responsibility for anyone else. It's this rejection of charity and solidarity, and through that comes her rejection of her daughter's gayness. If you're looking at it in defying social expectations, her daughter's literal queerness, in her daughter's understanding of community, comes, the aspect of solidarity, of charity, and of the social contract, as in, caring for one another. So the mother starts out completely rejecting this, resenting her daughter for being so headstrong. And then, stuff happens with Jen because she's supposed to be transferred to a different home, but where the mother knows that the standards of care aren't as good. And through all of that, because she finds herself getting angry on Jen's behalf, that that this is happening. And as the novel goes on, she discovers that one, she cares. She cares about someone who's got nothing to do with her, but she cares, and she finds the will to change those circumstances. She inadvertently gets caught. The lecturers are protesting, and there's a counter protest, which really isn't so much a protest as just hurling obscenities at them. And the mother one time sort of accidentally gets caught in the middle of that. Basically, the situation escalates, and the protesters are violently assaulted. Green comes home with bruises, and that's sort of the turning point for the mother, because at the care home, stuff's happening with Jen. She sees her child hurt, and there's a thing like just happening before that where she considers sort of parent-child suicide. That's a very hard-hitting scene, and she actually, she says to Lane when Green is not home, I could kill you for what you've done to my child, because she sees Lane as this corrupting influence, and that if she could just get rid of Lane, then Green would, accept her fate and marry a man, and everything would be fine, because, she'd get the social advancements that her mother wants for her. One thing that I really appreciate about Concerning My Daughter is that it's not Green herself who's tasked with changing her mother's mind. It happens through, circumstances. Obviously, for the purpose of the plot and the novels, those circumstances are, somewhat contrived. And there's a main conceit in the parallel between her home life and the life at the care home, and finding that she is actually angry about injustice on behalf of someone else, and not just unlocking something inside her. But it's never, the responsibility is never placed on Green or on Lane to change the mother's mind. They do talk about it, they do argue. Green is steadfast in defending her choices and saying, no, these are my choices and I do not need you to like them. That's just something that I really appreciate. It's not, it's not a grand emotional speech from Green that changes her mother's mind. It is her mom sitting with those feelings, sitting with that discomfort, and finding someone who inspires a change within her. And, the mother joins her daughter and Lane at the protests. She's with them now. She has met and talks to the other lecturers, and she closes out the novel recognizing that no, her daughter is right. everyone should have the right to live the way they want to. And if someone cannot speak for themselves, then it's our responsibility to speak up for them. And then, as I said, on the completely other end of the spectrum, my sister, the serial killer. It's just very good. it's just incredibly good. Oyinkan Braithwaite, she sort of wrote it in a rush. It's very well paced. It's quite slim. Like the pacing is very tight. Stuff happens in quick succession, but you definitely have parts of the story where you're just waiting for something to happen along with the protagonist, and in those moments it moves achingly slowly, and it's so well done. It's about two sisters. The older sister, Courtney, is the protagonist. She's also a nurse. She works at a hospital, and her younger sister, Ayola, she has this habit of having a lot of consecutive boyfriends, and most of them end up dead because her sister knows how to get blood out of things. She calls her, and then they clean up the body, and then they have to dump the body, and then they have to wait for the investigation to blow over. The novel starts pretty much literally as she gets a call. As Courtney gets a call from Ayola because she's in trouble, and it's there's a lot of emphasis placed on how Courtney, as the older sister, is responsible for her younger sister. Yeah, so it starts with a kill, and the trouble is, Courtney works at a hospital, like I said, and there's a young doctor, Tade, who's very handsome and very sweet and very lovely, and they sort of flirt. Courtney definitely has a huge crush on him. It's unclear whether those feelings are reciprocated, but also that doesn't matter because Ayola visits Courtney at the hospital one time. You can see where this is going. And he only has eyes for her. They start dating, he starts courting her. Courtney feels, she's jealous, of course she is. Ayola is definitely portrayed as selfish, acts like butter couldn't melt in her mouth, but she knows exactly what she did. And you get to a point where the story doesn't always line up, and then with Tade, Courtney does try to drive a wedge in between them. She even, I think, she tries to steal the engagement ring out of Tade's office after he tells her that he's going to propose. She's basically given up, resigned herself to it, and then one night she gets a phone call, and it's not Ayola who called her, it's Tade, because now it's Ayola who's ended up with a knife in her gut. Tade claims that she tried to attack him, wrestled the knife from her. It was his self-defense, which at first Courtney is entirely, able to believe because it would support her hunch that, Ayola isn't just defending herself, but that she is, murdering people. Then something changes, and in the end she actually flips. Like, even though she really did love Tade, and they together accuse him of attacking Ayola. And this is mainly this happens because their father was abusive. And there was one incident that Courtney actually remembers relatively late. That was the first act of Courtney protecting her sister, because Courtney sort of hatches the plan of killing their father and goes through with it to prevent him selling Ayola off in marriage, and to prevent him further beating them and their mother. She kills him when she's herself basically still a child. That's the sort of thing she remembers. Yeah, she takes her side, and together they completely ruin Tade. Yeah, in the end she chooses her sister, and that's obviously intertextually far apart from concerning my daughter. They tickle me in different ways because one is overcoming prejudice, and the other is my sister the serial killer comes out at, I will accept my sister for who she is in defiance of the social contract, in defiance of the law, certainly, actually in accordance with what in a twisted sort of accordance with what is socially expected of her, namely to take responsibility for the mistakes of her younger sister. In a twisted way, does what's expected of her. She takes responsibility for her sister's killings. So that sort of on the darker end of that spectrum. Also, again, in characterization and in narrative structure, that you're finding all of these things out through flashbacks, because stuff like those things in My Sister the Serial Killer are very much relate to you, like very piecemeal. You get slices. You get the sense that their father was not a good man very early on, but you don't realize the extent, the abuse, and the extent of what he was willing to do to his kids until relatively late. And like the details of Ayala's killings, and what Karede does at the hospital and everything. Like just that narrative structure like really adds to the tension and to the suspense. And in Concerning My Daughter, you see everything happening chronologically in real time, basically. And there are a few flashbacks to her mom's own youth and how she got to where she is, how difficult it is for a woman her age to work. And I really enjoyed both of those. And now the last pair, Stray and Eternal Threads. Like I said in the intro, humanity is either completely gone or almost gone in both of those games. They each take place in a cyberpunk dystopia, or at least a far future dystopia. Stray is definitely the more cyberpunk of the two titles in its use of environments and especially lighting, because in cyberpunk dystopias you'll see this when you look at NeoCab, you'll see this when you look at Cloudpunk. Like the lighting, and the use of colors is so important in cyberpunk, and Stray has that as well. It's a really colorful neon environment that lights up the dark, which is a really powerful theme that I'm gonna come back to in a moment. Eternal Threads basically takes place entirely in the dark. Because it happens entirely in one house, the whole story takes place in one building. It's a burnt out house, and you end up there after a house fire that claimed the lives of all of the 6 housemates that lived in that building. The premise is, the main conceit of the story is that humanity has dicked around with time travel too much, has released a ton of radiation, so the planet is basically uninhabitable outside of a walled garden where humanity still lives. And their futzing with the timelines has led to so much timeline corruption that people who should have lived died, in freak accidents like a house burning down, so that humanity, at the point where your player character, Agent 43, enters the stage, is nearly extinct. Your task as an agent for this unspecified agency is to go back in time and fix the timeline by identifying and manipulating key decisions that people made that led to their deaths. So in this case, in trying to save these 6 housemates, you have to identify the crucial moments in the days, basically in the week leading up to the night they all died, to either get them out of the house entirely or get them to just a position where they're gonna be not too unconscious, so that they, when the fire breaks out, they can actually save themselves. There isn't a lot of cyberpunk to it. There's a little bit of tech in that you have future gadgets to help you do this. Your main thing is your visualizer, which looks basically a little bit like the motion tracker from Alien Isolation, just that you're wielding it in your other hand. But that helps you literally visualize the timeline and the events, because you sort of have projected holograms of what happened, because with the other tech that you place around the house, it picks up the time stream and then visualizes events, those memories. And so the humanity and the lives of these people are displayed and defined entirely in their absence, because they're not there to tell you what they were thinking at the time. They're not there. If you change the timeline and you save a couple of them, they don't suddenly appear beside you to mourn the people that at that point in your manipulation of the timeline are still dead. You never really meet them within the game. Actually, at the end, and this is a huge spoiler, but at the end you're actually abducted by some other guy who seems to be working for the same agency, but maybe a different timeline version of it. And you know, he actually abducts you to a different point in the future, so that's great. So you don't even get back to, you know, your own time, and you certainly never meet the people that you saved. But you are, you know, through their absence, so intimately acquainted with who they were and what they did and what they wanted, what they felt, what they feared about their lives and about each other, and about, you know, their histories with each other or apart, that you know them. And, you know, the building as it is, because you can't, the point isn't preventing the fire. The fire is going to happen, so the building is going to burn out. It's just, you know, the question whether all 6 of them are going to die in it. The building does burn down, but you still, you know, it's ravaged by fire and by the water damage, of course, but you find stuff. You know, you see things left behind, like family photos that somehow have survived in the drawer. So you track these people's lives both by the memories that you can visualize on the timeline, but also by what physically they have left behind. Yeah, it's really affecting, because you, even if you can't, you know, your character can't touch them, and you certainly can't as the player, because, you know, I can't play VR because that gives me motion sickness, but there's like several degrees of separation from them, but you get to know them so well. You learn a lot about their lives, and there's a lot of, to get to the best ending, there's a ton of heavy subject matter in that game. And even though, like, what I criticized was the lack of more specific content warnings for it, I do like how they dealt with these subjects. And so to come back to Stray, one of the things that sets Stray apart to me is not just the fact that you play an incredibly cute cat, but it's the way that they too use environmental storytelling to show you what happened and the lengths humanity went to. Stray is also set in a world where basically climate catastrophe was on the horizon. Corporations tried to find ways to deal with the planet's waste pollution. Trouble is that they invented an organism that could, you know, consume anything, like literally anything. And what they wanted that organism to consume was organic waste. But what happened was that organism started eating through metal too. That's the Zerks. That's one of the main threats to Kitty Cat in the game, actually. And that's one thing that happened. Humanity just completely lost control. You know, it's been long enough that what humanity did was wall themselves into a dome, basically, into a domed city, completely cut off from the outside, and that's what they call the rest of the planet. They just call it the outside. There's like an artificial sky. It's basically because there's no sunlight, and they have lights, but it's pretty much always dark in there, because in order to prevent pollution, everyone had to have their lights off all the time. And the humans, when they were still alive, it was an act of rebellion and of protest to turn on a light and put it in your window to signal, I'm still here, I'm still alive. Because it's very clear that it's corporation who made these mistakes, right? It's corporations who brought about the climate catastrophe, and who made the Zerks, human scientists. They made plants that could grow entirely in the dark, and they made the companions, which are, if you've seen anything about Stray, then you'll have seen them around. They're basically humanoid droids with, displays for faces, and their characters' designs are incredibly cute. They're still there. They're still there, even after all humans have died. They became self-aware, they became sentient, and they actually took on a lot of human habits, and they have a big fondness for humans, or the soft ones. They have a huge fondness for humanity, and so they still take care of the plants, and they still, because they could probably see in the dark or whatever, but they keep the lights on. The kitty cat that you play falls into the city from the outside, because it's been long enough that nature has basically taken the outside world back over. Like you still have like industrial infrastructure and everything, but it's basically nature has reclaimed it. Your task as the cat, of course, is to get back to the outside, but you meet companions, you meet the outsiders who want to get there, who want to get out of the city. They have a manifesto, and BlueTwelve, your little companion robot, was actually the consciousness of a human scientist in a tiny drone body, he vowed before, you know, his human body died, he vowed that he would get back to the outside again. They're gone, but, you know, their legacy and their memories remain, and you as Agent 43 care for those memories. Obviously your aim is to, you know, to get them back to life, 6 of them, but like I said, you don't get to meet them, so, you know, their humanity is still defined by their absence. And, you know, certainly their humanity is defined by their absence in the fact that they shouldn't be dead, and it's your mission to rescue them, no matter who they are, because none of them are like, you know, it's not like, oh, you know, he's gonna go on to win the Nobel Prize or whatever. It's not that you're rescuing someone, they will become a scientist that will save us all. It's like, no, it's 6 completely ordinary people. It's the same with Stray, because, you know, obviously B12, they were a scientist and they want to see the outside, but who you meet and who you talk to is entirely, it's the entire thing is just serendipity. There's no one who you guide through who's like the one savior or anything. Like, everybody who you meet on the way is integral to your quest. None of them are more important than the other, and they're all willing to, if necessary, sacrifice themselves. It's like those companions really held on to the best of what humanity had to show them and to teach them, which is that spirit of community, taking care of each other, and believing that if we can help one of us, then we help all of us. I think both of those games are an intriguing look what remains of humanity after we're definitely or almost gone. What are the things that we want to hold on to? What are the things that we want to be remembered for? We are actively in the process of destroying our planet, you know, grappling with the questions, are we worth saving? Is it worth putting up a fight? You know, do we believe in the best of humanity, despite all evidence to the contrary? And remembering that, you know, no matter who it is, you know, each individual person is important for all of us. And I think from both of those games, those are really powerful themes and things to take away from them. So that was today's spoiler chat. 9 games and novels that I really enjoyed and that have stayed with me since I've played them or read them. And yeah, like I said, I really love looking at intertextuality and finding things that you know, tickle my brain or that touch my heart across mediums, across texts. And so I wanted to talk about them. And now I have. Now I've made it everyone else's problem. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of these in the future, please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like on your way home and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon for other videos coming up soon. There's links in the description box below. And yeah, if you've stuck it out until now, all I can say is thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you have a lovely day. Bye.